A man dared to run from God, but then he was cast into the sea, and the sea did not kill him. It delivered him to a creature, ancient, silent, terrifying. 3 days, 3 nights, no light, no escape, only a whisper from deep inside the belly of death. And in that place, beyond loneliness, beyond fear, God did not punish him. He whispered, "You were not swallowed to die. You were held to listen." Watch the entire video, and God will bless you. There are nights when the sky ceases to be sky, when it becomes nothing but a black veil pulled over the soul of the earth, like an invisible funeral shroud. The moon still hangs there, pale and distant, like the dead gaze of one who has seen every promise broken. On a low rooftop near Joppa, a man lay awake. He could not sleep. He was Jonah, the man whose name had been carved into the marrow of his bones by the voice of God. He had heard it, not with his ears, but in the deepest strata of his being, a whisper that split the soul like a sacred blade. Arise. Go to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim judgment against it. Their wickedness has risen before me. There was no negotiation, no questions, no room to refuse, only a decree. But Jonah was afraid, not because he doubted the one who spoke. He feared because he knew too well the gravity of that voice. Nineveh was a city of blood, home to those who worshipped gods of stone and fire, a place where truth was torn apart and prophets never returned whole. Jonah did not want to die, but he also could not live as a traitor. And so he chose what he thought was escape. He ran from God. The next morning, before the sun had scattered the mist, Jonah departed. He moved like a fugitive, but inside, he knew there was no darkness thick enough to hide him from the eye that sees all. Still, he went, not because he lacked faith, but because he could not bear the weight of divine expectation. In Joppa, he found a ship bound for Tarshish, a place as far from Nineveh as the world allowed. He paid the fare and boarded, carrying with him a fragile hope that he might disappear into the unknown, evade that gaze that pierced through flesh and soul alike. But the sea is no sanctuary. The sea is a mirror of heaven. The sea speaks the language of wrath. The first night at sea was quiet. The waves lapped softly, and the sailors laughed as if they'd left all danger behind. Jonah curled in the shadows, trying to lull himself to sleep. But the voice still echoed not outside, but inside his blood. Jonah, do you think you can flee? He sweated in the dark. The salt mingled with fear. No one saw him weep, but the sea did. On the second day, the sky changed. Clouds rolled in like blind beasts from beyond the horizon. The wind became something else, a hiss, a groan, a pulling of breath from the lungs of the world. The The sailors raised their eyes. They stiffened. The sea began to rage, not in waves, but in pulses, as though something alive and furious churned beneath. Then the storm descended, without warning. Thunder cracked like the scream of a betrayed god. Winds shredded sails like flesh. Water crashed over the deck with vengeance. The sailors screamed, shouting prayers to every god they knew. But the sea did not listen. Something ancient was enraged. And though they could not name it, they felt it. This was not weather. This was judgment. Amid the chaos, they found Jonah asleep in the ship's hold. Not the sleep of peace, but the sleep of a man resigned to the knife. They shook him, shouted, demanded he call upon his God. But Jonah only stared. He knew. The sea had remembered. They cast lots, a ritual as old as fear, and the lot fell to Jonah. The wind paused, listening. Jonah spoke, "I am a Hebrew. I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land, and I am fleeing from him." The sailors froze. They had heard of this God, but never met one who dared to run from him. "What must we do to you?" they asked, "so the sea will be still?" Jonah's voice was stone. "Throw me overboard. The sea will calm." They resisted. They rowed. But the storm grew. The wind screamed like demons in hunger. At last they prayed not to their own gods, but to Jonah's. "O Lord, do not hold us guilty for this man's death." And they cast him into the deep. The moment Jonah hit the water, the storm ceased. The sea smoothed to glass. The sky became as if nothing had ever stirred. The sailors fell to their knees. But Jonah, he sank. Deeper. Each layer of ocean wrapped around him like a shroud. There was no light, no air, only darkness. And then a shape moved. A vast silhouette with no eyes and no teeth. A mouth opened, and Jonah was swallowed. Inside that monstrous being, time dissolved, space unraveled. Jonah did not die, but he did not live. He drifted between flesh and fluid inside something older than memory. He heard groaning, not of the beast, but of souls lost within. Cries, lamentations, and something worse, prayers that had never been answered. For 3 days and 3 nights, Jonah was entombed within a moving grave. No angel came, no torch, just Jonah and the unbearable silence that suffocates hope. In that pit of hopelessness, he prayed, not with lips, but with soul, Lord. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you. From the depths of Sheol, I cried, and you heard me. That prayer ascended not through words, but through the raw fiber of being. It pierced flesh and ocean and sky. It reached the throne of the one who called him from the womb. And God, who is not bound by fish or flood, commanded. The beast rose toward the shore, and in a retching heave, It expelled Jonah. He lay on the sand, pale as death, his clothes in tatters, his body drenched in bile and mystery. But his eyes had seen something no language could bear. And in the sea wind, the voice returned Jonah, "Arise, and go to Nineveh." This time he did not speak. He only stood and walked into the darkness where truth and judgment waited. He walked not toward a city, but toward judgment. His sandals bit into dry earth step by step, while the voice of the Lord echoed like distant thunder in his bones. Jonah's body still smelled of the deep, salt, bile, and something else, the scent of a tomb that had been opened and not yet resealed. He did not speak. He had no companion. Only silence walked beside him, and that silence knew his name. The road to Nineveh stretched like a serpent's spine beneath the sun. Dust clung to his eyelids. Wind whispered through thorny trees, and in the whisper, he thought he heard laughter, not of men, but of spirits who remembered old fires. He was not afraid anymore. That part of him had drowned long ago. At last, the city came into view. Nineveh did not rise. It loomed. Walls taller than trees, gates carved with monsters, lions with wings, bulls with human eyes, bearded gods, frozen in mid-roar. The stones of Nineveh did not rest, they clenched. The city did not breathe, it growled. Jonah paused at its shadow, staring up at a land that had forgotten heaven. No guards questioned him. No merchants turned their heads. The gates swallowed him whole. Inside, the air was thick with iron and incense. Children played beside blood altars. Women painted their faces with ash and gold. Men drank wine from skulls turned into goblets. Every alley was lined with statues, hundreds, maybe thousands, idols with cracked eyes and smiling mouths, faces broken from centuries of prayerless worship. He walked without blinking. He walked for a full day from sunup to sundown, without once speaking a word. But on the second day, he stopped. He stood in the marketplace, wide crowded, filled with song and smoke. He climbed the steps of a forgotten shrine. He raised his hands, and then with a voice dry from fire and burial, he shouted, "Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown." People turned. Some laughed. Some frowned. One child dropped her bread. The words hung like flies over a carcass. No explanation, no name, just a sentence from the storm. Jonah stepped down. He walked away, but his words stayed behind. Whispers began. The Hebrew prophet, the man from the sea, the one who brings doom. No one could agree on his face, but everyone remembered his words. 40 days. 40 days, 40 days. On the third day, he stood at the gates of a temple. Its priests wore robes of black and gold. They saw him approach and spat. "You again," one said. "Prophets like you die here." Jonah looked past him, toward the idol burning inside. Not today. He turned left and shouted again. 40 days, Nineveh shall fall. People began to follow him. Not many, but enough. Enough to disturb the priests. By nightfall, rumors reached the king's court. The king of Nineveh was no ordinary ruler. He had cut the tongues of liars and worn them around his neck. He had burned cities and planted flowers in their ashes. He had heard every prophecy before and silenced them all with iron and oil. But this Jonah, he had not come begging. He had come from the belly of something beyond. And he had said only one thing, yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. The king summoned his scribes. Find him. But Jonah did not need to be found. He arrived. He stepped into the king's hall, barefoot, cloaked in dust eyes, like winter. The guards froze. The king leaned forward. Jonah spoke once more. 40 days, and silence followed. The king rose from his throne, not with rage, not with mockery, but with a shudder, like a man whose spine had heard truth before his mind accepted it. He tore his robes. He stepped down into ashes, and then he commanded, "No one shall eat, no one shall drink, not the man, not the beast, not even the children. Let all wear sackcloth. Let them cry out to God. Let them turn from evil. And perhaps he will relent." And Nineveh changed. The music stopped. The fires died. People knelt in dust. Slaves and lords alike wept beneath the same sky. Even the animals walked quietly. Jonah watched it all from a hill outside the walls. He built a shelter from broken sticks. He shaded himself, and he waited. He waited for fire. He waited for sulfur. He waited for the wrath of God to fall like a sword upon the city's neck. But nothing came. No lightning, no death, only silence. And Jonah burned with fury. He looked to heaven. "I knew you would do this," he cried. "I fled because I knew you were merciful. I knew you would forgive them." He pounded the dirt. "Why did you send me at all? Better that I die than watch mercy fall on murderers." But heaven did not strike him. Instead, a plant grew beside him overnight. Its leaves spread like a curtain. It cooled his head. And Jonah, though angry, rested. But the next morning, a worm came. It ate the roots. The plant withered, and the sun returned. Jonah groaned. He begged again for death, and the voice of the Lord spoke quiet and terrible. "You pity a plant that lived one night. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 souls who do not know their right hand from their left, and animals, too. Shall I not pity them?" Jonah said nothing. He stared at the city, not as it was, but as God saw it. And in that gaze, the storm within him finally broke. The silence was unbearable. Jonah sat beneath the skeletal shelter of sticks and vine, the dried roots curling like dead veins at his side. Above him, the sun hung swollen and merciless, as if mocking his very presence. No fire fell from heaven. No smoke curled from the walls of Nineveh. The city stood alive, breathing, whispering in its own repentance. But that breath to Jonah was a betrayal. He had come here to see justice. He had come to watch a city fall. He had walked the path of prophecy, crossed the wasteland, and spoken the fire-touched words with trembling obedience. And now the people wept, fasted, clothed themselves in ash and grief, and lived. They lived. Jonah dug his fingers into the dirt. The earth felt warm, dry, too alive. His eyes narrowed. His jaw clenched. "This is why I fled," he muttered to no one but the wind. "I knew you were merciful. I knew you would turn from wrath. Why send me at all?" He could not look at the city any longer. It stood there like a scar he could not cleanse. And beneath it all, the quiet voice, the one that had called him from the deep, from the fish's belly, from the storm, remained silent. God did not answer. Not yet. Jonah's thoughts grew darker. The longer he sat, the more the silence inside him turned to noise. Memories crawled back into his bones. The roar of the sea, the rank stench of bile, the hollow moans inside the creature that swallowed him. He remembered the suffocation, the cold, the voices that were not human, whispering from within the beast. Was that torment for nothing? Was his near death, his humiliation, his pain, all for a city to be forgiven? He slammed his fist into the earth. It gave no reply. That night, the wind rose. It came not from the east or west, but from nowhere, swirling around his shelter with a hiss that felt alive. The sticks rattled. Dust lifted, and in the eerie hum of it, Jonah heard again what he feared most: silence from God. No rebuke, no confirmation, just stillness. The next day, the heat grew cruel. The sun scalded his skin. The vine that had grown beside him, a strange, sudden gift from God, had withered completely. Its shade was gone. The worm had done its work in the dark. What once covered him with comfort now lay shriveled and brown at his feet. Jonah wept, not for the plant, not even for Nineveh, but for the weight of being called and then being ignored. Why, he cried aloud, why bless me with shade just to take it away? Why give comfort only to destroy it? Why not destroy me instead? And finally, the voice came, but it did not thunder. It did not rage. It whispered, "You mourn the vine," God said, "though you did not plant it, though it lived only one night." Jonah blinked. His lips parted, but no words came. The voice continued, "Shall I not mourn Nineveh, a city of more than 120,000 souls, men and women, children and cattle? Shall I not show mercy?" Jonah's mouth closed. He looked toward the city again. What he saw was not what he expected. He saw people not in sin, not in violence, but in prayer. A woman rocked a child on a rooftop. A merchant gave away food to the poor. A priest smashed an idol and threw its fragments into the river. It was not perfect, but it was different. Jonah shivered, not from cold, from truth. He remembered the belly of the great fish, the pulsing dark, the ancient cries echoing in its ribs. He remembered his prayer in the deep, how he had pleaded for mercy. And mercy had come. Was he then more worthy than they? The thought sickened him. He rose from the ground. His legs were stiff, his heart heavier. He did not speak again for hours. Instead, he wandered not into the city, but away from it, into the hills, into the scrubland where shadows stretched long across the earth, and even birds dared not cry. He needed time. He needed God. But God did not speak again. Not that day, not that night. The stars blinked like ancient eyes in a vault of black. Jonah lay beneath them. No vine to shade him, no shelter to protect him. And in that wild, wind-scoured place, he finally allowed himself to break. He cried, tears of anger, tears of loss, tears of confusion, tears for being used, tears for being changed. When the sun rose again, he did not stand. He sat quietly, hands clasped in dust. A soft rustling came from nearby. He turned. A goat, thin, trembling, had wandered into the clearing. It stood still, as if waiting. Jonah blinked. The goat looked at him, and then, slowly, it knelt. He swallowed. Something shifted. Not in the goat, in him. Mercy. Not lightning, not fire, not wrath, but mercy. Could that be holy too? He closed his eyes. The wind brushed past his face softer now. He breathed, and for the first time since the whale, he did not resist. He wandered, not away from God, but into the lingering edges of his presence. Those dry, haunted places where the veil between divine and mortal thins, not with fire, but with silence. Jonah's feet cracked the brittle soil beneath him, each step heavy with a weight he no longer knew how to carry. He had obeyed. He had spoken. He had watched. And Nineveh still stood. The voice of God had gone quiet again, not in rejection, not in wrath, but in the way a storm sometimes leaves suddenly and without farewell. He kept walking. Days bled into one another. He no longer counted them. The sun became a blur above his head. The nights turned cold, but they did not bite as sharply as the thoughts that gnawed within. How strange, he thought, that I was swallowed by a beast and lived, and yet I fear the softness of mercy more than the darkness of death. That truth haunted him. He had seen things no man should have seen. The belly of the fish had been a tomb, yes, but also a womb. He had been broken there, remade, not stronger, not holier, just emptied, hollowed out like a clay jar too long in the kiln. And now God had poured into him the one thing he never wanted: compassion. He resented it, but he could not deny it. He stopped one night in a dried ravine where the bones of old animals crumbled like ancient prayers. He built no fire. The stars were his only witness. And for the first time since the whale, he spoke to God without rage. Why me? The question escaped him like breath from lungs long held. You have other prophets, stronger ones, willing ones. Why use me, a man whose heart fights you, even when his mouth obeys? Silence answered, but it was not empty silence. It was the silence of someone listening. So Jonah continued, I loved your justice. I loved your fire. I was ready to burn with you. But then you showed me something. I never asked for mercy." He clenched his jaw. "I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to understand it. But you made me watch them kneel. You made me see their tears. You let me feel what you felt. And now, I am no longer who I was." The wind stirred soft and unsettling. Jonah looked up at the sky. The stars did not blink. They burned. They watched. The next morning, he found an old well, dry, cracked, its stones sun-bleached and hollowed by time. But he sat beside it as if expecting something, and something came. Not a voice, not a vision, a traveler, dust-covered, thin eyes sunken. A woman. She paused when she saw him. "You are the prophet," she said. Jonah stiffened. He did not reply. The woman sat. "They speak of you in Nineveh. They say you are the ghost who walked out of the sea." "I'm no ghost," he muttered. "Then what are you?" He looked at his hands, at the scars the fish's stomach had left on his arms, at the calluses shaped by obedience. "I'm a man who tried to escape God and failed." The woman said nothing for a long time. Then she whispered, "I tried too." Jonah looked at her. She wasn't weeping. Her eyes were dry, but her voice trembled like a string pulled too tight. "I buried my child to idols," she said, "before you came." The words struck him like stones. "I thought it was holy. I thought it would bring protection. But nothing changed. Until you came." Jonah swallowed. The woman's fingers dug into the dust. "I fasted. I tore my robes. I threw down the statues. But the blood, it's still in my hands." Jonah looked away. He couldn't bear it. But her next words froze him. "Will your God still see me?" He could not answer. His voice died in his throat. She didn't wait for him to speak. She rose and left, and Jonah sat alone. The question echoed inside him, like the voice in the fish's belly. Would God still see her? He remembered the plant, how it shaded him, how it died, how God had grieved for it. And if he grieved for a vine, would he not also grieve for a woman? He stood, not suddenly, not triumphantly, but slowly, deliberately. He looked back, not toward Nineveh, but toward the well, and he whispered, "Yes." He did not know if she could hear, but he said it anyway, because it was the only thing that felt true. That night, the stars seemed closer, not kinder, but clearer, as if creation itself had exhaled. Jonah walked again, not toward purpose, but toward presence. The desert did not resist him. The silence did not torment him. And though God did not speak, Jonah felt something new, not fire, not fear, but something like peace. It was not loud. It was not bright. It was not easy, but it was real. The desert no longer threatened him. Its vastness, once overwhelming, had become something like a confession, raw open, too honest to be ignored. Jonah walked without resistance now, not with joy, not with certainty, but with a kind of surrender that left no argument behind. The anger, once a fire in his bones, had cooled into something darker, quieter. It was not peace. It was understanding, and understanding always came with pain. Each morning brought silence. No new command, no new vision. He was not called again, and still he did not return home. He wandered, not out of fear, but because he no longer knew where he belonged. He was a man who had seen the mouth of the deep, who had spoken with a voice not his own, who had cursed a city and watched it fall, not into ruin, but into grace. That truth followed him like a shadow. Grace, that strange, unsettling light that exposes all things and saves them anyway. He came to a grove sparse, dry trees, twisted in shapes like pleading hands. Beneath one, a traveler had made camp. Smoke curled from a small fire. The scent of goat meat drifted in the air. Jonah hesitated, but the man called out, "Prophet." Jonah's stomach turned. Even here, he stepped forward. The traveler was old, his face like weathered bark. His eyes, however, were clear, unblinking. "Come," the man said. "Sit. You look like one who has tasted the belly of death." Jonah sat without speaking. They ate in silence. The fire crackled. Finally, the man asked, "Was it worth it?" Jonah looked up. "What?" "The prophecy, the journey, the sea, the city." Jonah stared into the flames. "No," he said, then paused. "And yes," the man smiled. "You sound like one who has seen mercy." Jonah's hands clenched. "Mercy," he whispered, "is terrifying." The old man nodded. "So is holiness." Jonah looked at him sharply. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. He simply turned his gaze to the sky. They say, he murmured, that those whom God uses are never the same. They walk differently, speak differently. Their eyes are haunted. Jonah stood. "I should go." The old man didn't stop him, but as Jonah turned, he heard him say, "There will be others, like you, called, broken, buried, raised, and each must choose what to do with mercy." The wind picked up. When Jonah looked back, the man and the fire were gone. He walked faster after that, not because he feared the man, but because he feared how much of himself had been seen. He found himself thinking of Nineveh again. He had left it behind physically, but inside him it had taken root. He remembered the sound of their crying, the ash on their skin, the strange purity in their repentance. They had believed him. They had believed God. He, the unwilling messenger. They, the condemned city. And God, the judge who relented, the judge who embraced. Was that weakness? Was that betrayal? He could not decide. One night, he dreamt of the fish again. Only this time, it was not a beast. It was a door made of living bone and shadow. He stood before it. Behind it, he heard the voice, not in anger, not in demand, just the voice. "Will you open it?" He woke, screaming. Sweat soaked his robe. His hands trembled, not from fear, from recognition. The door was not behind him. It was ahead, and he would face it again, in a different form, in a different time. But the call, it never truly ended. He sat beneath the stars, pulling his knees to his chest. "Am I still yours?" he asked aloud. The night did not answer, but something in his spirit stirred. A warmth, not comfort, but presence, a reminder. "You were never not mine." Tears slipped down his face. He let them. He did not know where the road would end. He only knew he had already passed through death once and lived, and that meant something, even if he didn't understand it yet. The path became narrower, not in the terrain, but within him. Jonah walked, but his steps no longer carried defiance or even mission. They carried memory, heavy, sacred, uninvited. Every wind that brushed his cloak reminded him of the breath that once summoned storms. Every shadow across his path echoed the belly of the beast, where his soul had been sifted like grain. He did not resist it. He did not embrace it. He simply carried it. Some nights, he found shelter in caves. Other nights, beneath olive trees, older than kings. And always the stars above watched not with warmth, but with awareness. Jonah had stopped asking for answers. Now he listened for the spaces between questions. It was in one such night, deep in the hills of forgotten lands, that he heard something new. Not a voice, not a vision, a sound, laughter, not cruel, not mad, the laughter of children, faint, distant. He rose, following it, like a moth to a flame it doesn't understand. Over the ridge, down a slope, through a broken grove, and there, nestled by a ruined altar, a village, small, silent in structure, but alive in spirit. He approached slowly. No one screamed. No one fled. The people simply looked up, as if they had been expecting him. An old woman met him first. "You've come from the city," she said. He nodded. Her eyes shimmered. "Then you've seen what mercy looks like." He couldn't answer. Not yet. They gave him food, bread baked with bitter herbs, water from a deep, cold well, and rest. He stayed one night, then another. On the third, a child approached him as he sat watching the dusk bleed into indigo. "Is it true?" she asked. He blinked. "Is what true? That God talks to you?" He hesitated. "Yes," he said. "Sometimes." She tilted her head. "What does his voice sound like?" He thought carefully. "Sometimes it sounds like thunder. Sometimes like a whisper. But most often, it sounds like silence." The girl frowned. "That's not a voice." He smiled barely. "No? But it still speaks." She ran off laughing. Jonah remained. The silence after her footsteps felt different, not empty, just waiting. That night he dreamed again, but it was not the fish, nor Nineveh, nor the door. It was a garden, overgrown, wild, sacred, and in the middle, a tree. It pulsed, with light, with breath. He couldn't tell. He stepped closer. Its roots were made of words, its branches, memory. He touched it and heard them, all of them, the prayers of Nineveh, the screams of drowning sailors, his own voice sobbing in the deep. They were not layered, they were one. He woke, gasping. His chest ached, his hands shook, not from fear, from fullness. The next morning, he rose before the sun. He walked to the edge of the village. The same old woman stood there. "You're leaving," she said. He nodded. "Why?" "Because I have not yet finished being undone." She said nothing, just placed a fig in his hand. "For the journey," she whispered. He walked on. Each mile was quieter. Not around him, within him. He no longer needed signs. He no longer feared the absence of thunder. He was learning a new language, one made of stillness. He stopped at a stream, knelt, not to drink, to listen. The water spoke, not in words, but in rhythm. He dipped his hands in, closed his eyes, felt the pulse, not of water, of the world, of God. It frightened him, but it didn't repel him, because somewhere, buried beneath the prophet, beneath the rebel, beneath the man Jonah remembered, he belonged, even now, even after everything. He was still held, still heard, still seen. The road ahead narrowed into a valley where wind did not blow. Trees did not grow here. No beasts called. No birds sang. And Jonah knew as soon as his feet touched that cracked path of ancient stone that he had entered a place untouched by men, a place where the world held its breath, and the ground still remembered the footsteps of God. The silence here was different. It was not empty. It was holy. Jonah slowed. He did not know where he was, but he knew this was where he needed to be. He had not seen a soul for days, and yet he felt watched, not by eyes, but by presence, the kind that wraps around you, not to choke, but to reveal. He set his pack down, kneeled on the dry soil. His lips did not form words. There were none left. What could he say that God didn't already know? He had fled. He had obeyed. He had burned with anger and wept with confusion. He had seen wrath. He had seen mercy. And he still didn't understand either. A hot wind stirred the dust in a slow spiral. Jonah did not move. He simply breathed. And then a shadow fell over him, not from cloud, not from bird, from nothing. Yet it was there, a veil of darkness, not cast by absence, but by a fullness too deep for light. Jonah looked up. There was no figure, no flame, just depth. And from that shadow came a voice, not loud, not soft, not male, not female, not outside, not within. It simply was. Jonah. He flinched, his name spoken like a thread pulled from the marrow. I am here, he whispered. Why did you run? The question was not accusation. It was invitation. Jonah trembled. I was afraid, he said. Of me? No. He paused, then quieter. Of who I become when I obey you. The wind stopped. The earth did not shift, but something vast listened. Jonah continued, when I speak. Your words, cities. When I carry your fire, people kneel. I didn't want that. I didn't want to be the one who bears the weight of your silence, your mercy, your judgment. He clenched his fists. I didn't want to be swallowed again. The darkness pulsed. You were swallowed to be spared. Jonah nodded. Tears welled in his eyes. I know. The silence, after his answer, did not sting. It soothed, like cool oil, over cracked skin. And then the voice spoke again. Do you now see why I sent you? Jonah hesitated. Yes, he said at last, not to destroy, not even to save, but to reveal. To whom? He inhaled. To them, then to me. The darkness did not answer. It didn't need to. Jonah bowed lower. His forehead touched the earth, and for the first time since the sea, he felt whole. Not perfect, but whole. The voice spoke again, once more final. You may return. Return where? To where they need to remember. Who? The silence shifted, and in it Jonah understood. Not just Nineveh, not just Israel, but all who forget, all who run, all who drown in themselves and need to be swallowed. Just to see the sky again. He stood. The shadow faded. The valley opened behind him, and Jonah walked back through the dust, through the olive trees, through the memory of the fish, through the echo of the vine. He did not walk as a prophet now, nor as a rebel. He walked as one who had seen God not in fire, but in forgiveness, and that sight would never leave him. The road home was never straight. Jonah knew this now, not just the path beneath his feet, but the one etched into his soul a spiral more than a line, a calling that curved like the belly of the fish that once held him in darkness. He returned not as he had left. He was quieter now, but inside something glowed, not fire, not fear, something older, something alive. The people did not recognize him at first. The man who had fled Joppa had worn ambition in his stride. The man who now entered the city carried shadows in his eyes and a strange softness in his shoulders, like one who had spoken with angels and remembered the weight of their wings. The elders approached him. "Where have you been?" they asked. He did not answer directly. "I went where the silence grew heavy," he said, "and found that even there he speaks." They did not understand, but they listened, because there was something in his tone, the kind of stillness that only comes after storms. In the days that followed, Jonah said little, but his presence changed things. He would walk past angry men, and their voices would lower. He would sit near the sick, and the room would quiet, not because he healed, not because he preached, but because his silence was not absence. It was witness. He had seen God, and he carried that sight with him. One night, a boy crept to his doorway. "Tell me the story," he whispered. Jonah looked up from the oil lamp flickering beside him. "What story?" "The whale," the boy said. "Is it true?" Jonah smiled gently. "It wasn't about the whale," he replied. "It was about the silence inside it." The boy blinked. "That doesn't make sense." Jonah leaned closer. "One day it will." The boy frowned, disappointed, but Jonah patted his shoulder. "Go sleep," he said. "Dream deep." He watched the child go, and for a moment, just a moment, Jonah saw a glimpse of the face he once had. The face of one who didn't yet know what it cost to carry a message from God. The next morning, he rose before the sun. He walked alone to a cliffside overlooking the sea. The same sea, the one that had swallowed him, the one that had surrendered him. He stood there in silence for a long time, and then he spoke not to the waves, to the one who had sent them. "You knew what I didn't." The wind answered, not with words, but with that familiar presence. "You knew I'd hate your mercy before I'd learned to need it." The sky stayed still. He continued, "You called me not to destroy Nineveh, but to destroy myself. The self that refused to believe you loved even them." He swallowed hard. "And now I know you do." He knelt on the edge of the cliff. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from awe, and the sea below did not roar. It exhaled, as if relieved, as if remembered. Far off, the wind shifted. A gull cried. A new generation stirred behind him, one that would forget again, run again, fall again. He knew this, but he also knew the call would rise again, in the night, in the fire, in the belly of beasts, in the hearts of those who tried to escape what they were born to carry. And when they asked for a sign, only one would be given. The sign of Jonah, the sign of the one who ran and was swallowed, who died and was spared, who hated mercy and was undone by it, who bore the silence and lived to speak again. And for them, for us, his story still waits in the deep, because we all run, but he always pursues. You've just witnessed the journey of a man who ran from God and found him waiting in the silence, in the storm, even in the belly of a beast. Jonah's story is not just ancient, it's eternal. Because the God who called him is still calling. Maybe he's calling you. Watch again, reflect deeply, and remember, no one is too far gone for mercy. May God bless you for watching to the end.